a group of us at GitLab, we knew that we were building something that had never been done before. You could just feel how historic it was. We all just kind of took a beat and looked at each other and said, I think if we ever try to go anywhere else after this, we're just going to be ruined. And my response to that was, yeah, we're going to be ruined for the ordinary.
There's a conversation I've been wanting to have for a long time about the intersection between my two favorite topics, remote work and AI. And I can't think of any person better to have that conversation with me than the oracle of remote work himself, Mr. Darren Murph. Darren, welcome to the show.
Andrew, great to see you, man.
I thought a fun place to begin would be to talk about what I believe is behind your head there. Do I spy a little Guinness Records plaque?
That's right. So it was bestowed in 2011. At the time, it was 17,000 or so articles in 4 years. And so the time component was really important. The math on that is a little loony. It breaks down to an article published every 2 hours, 24/7, 365 for 4 consecutive years.
Yeah, that is astounding, especially given that it's quantifiable that there is no AI slop in there. Am I correct in assuming that your most read piece of writing is probably the remote work Bible, close to my heart, that you wrote for GitLab, the distributed work playbook?
That's correct.
How did it come about? When did you realize that a playbook was going to be part of what you and GitLab and the world needed?
We thought, if there's an intentional way to build an in-office company, then there must be an intentional way to build a fully remote company. And we were maniacal about having a single source of truth for everything. These were cultural staples that were necessary to be elite at operating a fully distributed team. But it turned out they were also great business practices for every company, no matter whether they identified as fully remote or hybrid or in office. Because in a distributed team, documentation is the lifeblood. It's the superpower of any distributed team. Then you have to write these things down if you want to scale them across time zones and countries.
You're touching on what I wanted to ask about in terms of how AI has changed things, and how is the distributed work playbook different now than it was when you first wrote it?
I've recently finished a book called Distributed. It's coming out this November, and it's all of those lessons that I learned in that era of GitLab, but also in the years since, where technology has evolved even past where we were, and how AI is enabling remote first principles to be supercharged. And I'm seeing that organizations that invested in remote first principles are now having a much easier time layering AI first principles on top of it and getting great ROI. And it's just amazing how those two worlds work so beautifully together. But also for organizations that neglected AI or remote first principles, like great documentation and codifying how work happens and codifying where work happens and building a great remote culture. They put those on the back burner or ignored them entirely and used the office as a crutch. Really regretting that now in the world of AI, because if they're layering these tools onto really shaky infrastructure, not a lot documented, all they're getting are inferior answers and hallucinations.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Pre-AI, it was very valuable for companies to place a high degree of importance on documentation. Now, fast forward to today. All of that is still vital to being an elite company, but look at how much easier it is. You can automatically invite an AI note taker into every one of those calls. They take the notes, they transcribe, they can differentiate between my voice and your voice. They know what the action items are. They automatically email everybody at the end of it. And then you can also build tools that take those notes and put them in a knowledge base, something like a team Notion. And you can quickly create this collective hive mind of intelligence that was much more manual in the past. It's no less important, but it's so much easier to set up. And I credit AI for making it easier to be a more well-documented company. For companies that embrace it, it's going to be one of the big tailwinds.
Yeah, very true.
And for organizations that didn't do the hard work of building structure and clarity, if they're just layering on these AI note takers, but not being thoughtful about where this information goes, they're not actually building what I call an org brain, this kind of collective brain that the entire organization can tap into, it just becomes chaos and noise in a different form, because we don't really spend a lot of time talking about the prerequisites of making AI great. We just assume that the prerequisites are in there. And for a lot of organizations, they're still not. You've probably heard the phrase garbage in, garbage out. Mm-hmm. But the inverse is also true. If you put gold in, you're going to get gold out. And so if you are querying a database, if you're using Gen AI, for example, to query the org brain, and you've put a lot of effort into cleaning it up, deprecating old information, making sure that the latest information is validated, then all of the results that you get are going to be way more pure. The ability to trust information is going to become even more important. The addition to that now in the modern era is business moves at the speed of trust of information. To do this right, it has to be someone's job. And so many organizations are saying, oh, remote work is the job of everyone, or Gen AI is the job of everyone. But apply that same logic to any other role of any significance. Let's say information security. We don't just say like, oh, security is everyone's job. No, we hire a chief information security officer. And in most organizations, a team underneath of that to build in systems and guardrails and culture and training and documentation around what is acceptable from a security standpoint and what is not. If it's important enough, it's important enough to be someone's job. And I would argue that documentation and all things around remote infrastructure are just as important. If you think about the org brain, the thing that all of the organization queries to find answers, it becomes the grand central station of all information. Surely that is important enough to have someone, whether it's a chief AI officer or a head of remote or a chief documentation officer, someone that is looking after this incredibly precious resource, which is the collective intelligence of the entire organization.
It's 3 years since you left GitLab at this point. I'm curious to know, what are you doing now? A little birdie told me that you're head of culture at a company called Lovey. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, that's correct. So that's one of these companies that I'm helping to build the culture from the ground up. The founder, Shaheen Boydis, reached out to me. He's a multi-time founder, founded Remote Team, which was acquired by Gusto. I just love the way he thinks about remote work. And he's building an organization for the next era of builders. One of the cultural underpinnings is this concept of a manager of one, which is you hire someone that is deeply, deeply skilled in one area, but very dangerous in many other areas. And you pair that danger with the power of Gen AI, and they are shockingly capable at accomplishing the entire stack across whatever their specific product is. And this is something that I've been testing the waters on before. I thought it was this really powerful notion of if you hire high agency people and you give them lots of autonomy to run really fast, you give them great tools, lots of freedom, amazing things can happen. And in the age of Gen AI, that has just been supercharged. And so the people that we're hiring are just the world's best at the thing that they're the best in. And then they're able to use Gen AI to become vastly more capable in all of these other areas. And it enables us to run a really lean team that goes really fast. And we have a lot of fun, lots of experimentation, lots of agency, lots of freedom. And I really think it's a glimpse into the future. Many more teams are going to be built like this.
Yeah, and you mentioned earlier a phrase, ruined for the ordinary. And I saw this on Lovey's culture page and it really resonated with me. And I was just curious to let you unpack that a little bit. What does ruined for the ordinary really mean? Where did that come from?
Ruined for the ordinary came from a group of us at GitLab where as we were leading up to IPO, we knew that we were building something that had never been done before. You could just feel how historic it was. We all just kind of took a beat and looked at each other and said, I think if we ever try to go anywhere else after this, we're just going to be ruined. And my response to that was, yeah, we're going to be ruined for the ordinary. And so when you have spent significant amounts of time in the extraordinary, you're kind of ruined for anything less than that. When you've worked in an organization that's highly disciplined, highly values documentation, they have a bias towards asynchronous communication, they're deeply respectful of other people's time. When you go somewhere that doesn't value all of that, you feel it immediately. And so the bar is really, really high from where you go from there. And I think for the next generation of companies that are being built, they're going to mostly be built by people that were ruined for the ordinary in one way or another. And it's people that are saying, I know there's more out there. I know that we can build this in a different way. And finally, we have the technology that's going to enable us to take a chance and bet on that, and then find people that are of like mind that also want to bet on that idea with us.
Darren, you've spoken a lot of wisdom today. It's been an absolute pleasure having you here. Before we go, is there anything that we haven't had a chance to talk about that you wanted to say while you're here?
I think the last thing I'll say here is I really think the future of work is going to be relabeled the future of living. I think what we're building in the future of work is a means to a very different way of living. And I've even started to see shades of that in the remote era, where people are able to be more deliberate about where they live, the communities that they're involved in, make decisions to live closer to a national park, for example, or closer to family, for example, and still be able to plug their professional talents into an organization. And I think that is just a sea change in the interface between human and work. And I think the Gen AI iteration on this is just going to accelerate that. We're learning how to work more efficiently. We should then use that to ask, well, how do we live more differently? How do we involve ourselves in society in a way that might not have been possible before? Memento mori is one of my favorite quotes. Always be aware and cognizant of your own mortality. Today is really precious. The time that you have is really precious. And having the wisdom of how do you steward that time in a useful way, I really do think that that's going to become more prevalent in the world of work as people say, we have access to this amazing technology. How do we use it to live better lives?
Darren, thank you so much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure sitting here and talking with you today. For those watching from home who have been ruined for the ordinary by Darren's words of wisdom, don't miss his new book, Distributed, coming out in November, available for pre-order now and guaranteed to be packed to the rafters with tips and tricks for how to make distributed work really fly in the age of AI. Until then, I'm Andrew Allen, and the future of work is, as it always has been, out of office.